Can you imagine a Roman emperor officially marrying a castrated boy just to replace his dead wife? That's exactly what happened in ancient Rome, when Nero, one of history's most infamous rulers, transformed a young boy named Sporus into his new empress. Get ready to uncover one of the most bizarre and disturbing stories of antiquity. Few names in history inspire both fascination and horror as much as Nero, the last emperor of the Julio-Claudian dynasty. Ruling Rome from 54 to 68 AD, he became a symbol of tyranny and excess. Many know the legend of him setting the city on fire while playing the lyre, but his personal scandals were even darker. Rome, in the 1st century, was the center of the known world, filled with riches, intrigues, and ambition. Into this stage stepped Nero, not just as a ruler, but as a figure who shocked society with unimaginable behavior. Unlike other emperors who hid their vices, Nero flaunted them publicly. He mixed art with politics, desire with power, and cruelty with obsession. This story is not only about his extravagance, but about his most disturbing act, forcing a young boy named Sporus to become his wife. What begins with grief turns into a nightmare of control, abuse, and madness. Nero's inability to accept limits shaped one of the most tragic and bizarre episodes in Roman history. At the center of this tale is not just an emperor drunk with power, but also Sporus, a victim condemned to play the role of a dead woman. To understand how Nero could force Sporus into marriage, we must first see his mind. Raised by his ambitious mother Agrippina, Nero grew up among palace intrigues, learning manipulation and cruelty as survival skills. At only 17, he became emperor. Charismatic at first, he soon revealed instability. He preferred theater and music over military duty, shocking Rome's elite. To him, being emperor meant absolute freedom, even to reshape reality itself. Nero sought constant admiration. He saw himself as a misunderstood genius, yet his vanity made him dangerous. He eliminated rivals without hesitation, even his own mother. His cruelty extended beyond politics. He humiliated those around him for sport. As his reign continued, his eccentricities grew. He performed on stage, raced chariots, and lived as an artist rather than a ruler. To many Romans, this was shameful. To Nero, it was proof of his superiority. It was in this distorted mindset that Sporus entered his life, not as a person, but as a vessel for obsession. For Nero, turning a boy into his dead wife was not madness, but confirmation of his limitless power. Pompeia Sabina, Nero's wife, held a special place in his life. Their relationship, however, was stormy. Ancient sources tell us that during a violent argument, Nero struck her, causing her death. She was pregnant at the time, making the tragedy even more shocking. The event horrified Rome. The emperor who should protect his family had killed his wife. Yet instead of moving on, Nero became consumed by grief, a grief twisted by guilt and obsession. He could not accept her loss. Rather than mourn privately, he turned his sorrow into a public obsession. He searched for ways to bring her back, no matter how unnatural. This desperation would soon lead to one of the strangest chapters in imperial history. Pompeia's death was not only a personal tragedy, but the spark for Nero's most disturbing act, the transformation of Sporus into her living replacement. After Pompeia's death, Nero was broken. He cried constantly and surrounded himself with women who resembled her, but none could fill the void. His grief turned into obsession. He didn't just want someone similar. He wanted Pompeia reborn. That obsession became a plan. If nature would not give her back, Nero would force reality to bend. He began searching for someone who could play her role. Then came Sporus, a young boy with delicate, feminine beauty, eerily resembling the dead empress. To Nero, he was the perfect vessel for his fantasy. What followed would be an act of cruelty disguised as devotion. The emperor's refusal to accept loss pushed him to extremes. Pompeia was gone, but in his madness, Nero decided he could recreate her through Sporus. Sporus was a young boy of delicate and striking beauty. known for features that reminded many of a girl. In another life, he might have remained anonymous, living quietly in the vast Roman Empire. But fate brought him into Nero's gaze. To the emperor, Sporus was more than a youth. He was a mirror of Pompeia. His resemblance made him stand out among others in the court. Yet while to Nero this was obsession, to Sporus it meant danger. Once chosen, his life was no longer his own. Sporus entered the palace not as a free boy, but as a prisoner of Nero's grief and madness. What awaited him would strip him of identity, dignity, and even his body. Nero's obsession took a horrifying turn. To make Sporus into Pompeius' replacement, he ordered the boy to be castrated. It was not a secret act, but one carried out with Nero's approval, shocking even the decadent Roman court. For Sporus, it was a cruel violation, erasing his future and marking him forever. For Nero, it was simply a step in reshaping reality to his will. He saw himself not as cruel, but as powerful enough to bend life itself. The castration was more than a physical act. It was symbolic. It showed that Nero would stop at nothing, that his desires were law. Sporus was no longer just a boy. He was being remade into a ghost of the Empress Rome had lost. After the castration, Nero began shaping Sporus into Pompeius' image. He dressed the boy in jewels and fine robes, giving him the title and status of an empress. To the world, Sporus was no longer a youth. He was the new Pompeia. This transformation shocked the court. Senators and soldiers watched in silence, unable to oppose the emperor. What Nero had done was not love, but domination, bending another human being to fit his obsession. For Sporus, each robe and jewel was a chain. His identity erased, he lived not as himself, but as a replica of a dead woman. Nero's obsession reached its peak with a public ceremony. Before the eyes of Rome, he placed a bridal veil on Sporus and called him Pompeia. The empire's most powerful man had married a boy. The spectacle left Rome in shock. Some whispered in outrage. Others laughed in disbelief. Yet no one dared to stop him. The emperor's madness had become law. What should have been a moment of intimacy was turned into theater, a grotesque play in which Sporus was the unwilling star. After the wedding, Sporus lived permanently at Nero's side. At banquets and festivals, he appeared dressed as an empress, silent and submissive, while Nero reveled in excess. To the guests, it was both spectacle and scandal. Sporus was never treated as a person, only as a shadow, the living replacement of Pompeia. Behind the laughter and music, there was humiliation. Each feast was a stage where Nero flaunted his power, and Sporus endured in silence. The senators despised Nero's actions but remained silent. His cruelty and eccentricity disgusted them, yet fear kept them quiet. In whispers, they mocked him. Some even wrote satires, hidden in manuscripts, turning the emperor into a figure of ridicule. But none dared to confront him openly. To the Senate, the marriage with Sporus was more than scandal. It was proof that Rome itself was crumbling under Nero's rule. On the streets of Rome, the people spoke more freely than the Senate. They laughed, gossiped, and mocked their emperor in taverns and marketplaces. Songs and graffiti ridiculed Nero and his bride. For common citizens, the marriage was not just scandal, it was entertainment. But behind the mockery was a deeper truth. The people saw in Nero's madness a symbol of decay, proof that the empire was rotting from within. The union between Nero and Sporus became more than a scandal. It was a symbol. To some, it showed the emperor's complete detachment from reality. To others, it revealed the empire's weakness, ruled by personal obsession instead of reason. Sporus was no longer himself. He had become an icon of Nero's madness, a reminder that absolute power could twist life into grotesque theater. This marriage was not about love. It was about domination, control, and the terrifying reach of imperial authority. As revolts spread, Nero's allies abandoned him. The Senate declared him an enemy of Rome, and soldiers who once swore loyalty turned against him. Desperate, Nero fled the city, alone and hunted, He realized capture meant humiliation and torture. Rather than face it, he chose suicide, ending his reign in tragedy. The emperor who once seemed untouchable fell in fear and despair, his empire crumbling with him. With Nero gone, Sporus' suffering did not end. His enemies forced him to relive the humiliation, parading him as a cruel reminder of the dead emperor. Unable to escape the role imposed on him, Sporus chose death over further shame. His short life ended as tragically as it had been lived. He was never remembered for who he truly was, but only as Nero's obsession, a victim of power without limits. Nero and Sporus left behind one of the darkest stories in Roman history. For Nero, it was the ultimate display of power, bending life itself to his will. For Sporus, it was a life stolen, identity erased, and dignity denied. This tale is more than scandal. It is a reminder of how obsession and absolute authority can destroy lives. Even the mightiest emperors, feared by nations, could be consumed by madness and grief. In the ruins of Rome, their story still echoes. The price of unchecked power and the tragedy of a boy who became the ghost of a dead empress. The story of Nero and Sporus isn't just a bizarre curiosity from ancient Rome. It's a lasting reminder of how far power can go when unchecked. A young boy's life was erased and turned into a spectacle to satisfy the obsession of a man who thought he was above death. And even today, nearly 2,000 years later, this story still shocks and horrifies us. So, had you ever heard this dark side of Nero's story? If you found it fascinating, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell for more bizarre and captivating stories from history.